So keep in mind as we go, some questions that you've had or just concerns or whatever. We want to make this as interactive as possible. We can really, you guys just all take turns, and then I believe we have some new stuff to show you from some third-party groups. Eric,
way to go, Scott.
Eric can discuss what he's got going on here. If anybody has some questions, I can discuss about stuff. Alan can talk about customs as well, and how it is to keep people in line. And then we got Jason with some photographs. Which, do we want pictures of these photographs?
I think I took it on making one.
Well, at least you got speed.
I got speed. Sorry.
All right. So, of me. Wait a minute. We go on the airplane? So let's go ahead. We get this started with one of the biggest things that we always see is, why are these figures so much money? Does anybody in here have any idea what goes into production of a figure? No. All right. All right. Two. Would anybody like to really know, like, what goes into? I'll give you. We'll just get started. Like, for instance, this is a group called the Workshop. This was just a head upgrade piece, doing price checking, you know, to get still molds made and things. Just for the still molds alone is going to be $6,000 for a headpiece.
So that's actually a pretty good price.
Yeah. So we can start going from there.
It's like a Korean price.
Yeah. No, that's not. Let me drink my water. So, anybody have any questions about how, or wants to know how, like, a figure gets started? You guys want to come up to the mic? You just want to, like, hear about what goes into the process?
Walk us through the process. Yeah, walk us through it. And the costs along the way. And
all right. I think first is a lot of Crown and Coke to get started. You're going to go crazy.
Give me one of those conversations.
It is time consuming. Because the idea of, well, you know what, you've been designing with CAD.
Yeah, so, yeah, I just never sleep because I'm not smart enough to drink. So you want to start with the concept. When we're talking like a figure upgrade, you've got a lot to work with to start with. And I know from my design process, I know that each of these parts we design is going to be an expense. It's going to be an expense to us as a producer, and it's going to be an expense to you as a consumer. And so part of the design goal is to figure out what is the biggest bang for the buck that we can get with the least number of alterations. It's really easy to look at a figure like Fall Cybertron Grimlock and see, well, if they change the head and the chest and maybe some flippy tail panels, I can make them really, really Gen 1 and be like a deluxe masterpiece version. But that is a lot of extra work and a lot of extra parts and a lot of extra price, where maybe just adding a new head could give you all the difference you need. So that's the first consideration. And again, if we're talking an upgrade part, then you start taking measurements of the existing pieces, figuring out how much clearance you got, what you need to get the balls and sockets to fit, all that kind of stuff. And then it starts with, depending on the software you use, it starts with either a blank plane where you can draw a shape and start extruding, or you start with a cube and figure out how to pull and push the sides and cut parts out. And it takes a long time to get from that blank canvas, if you will, to the finished design. And along the way, in my process, because I happen to be lucky enough to have a 3D printer in-house, I do a lot of test printing and test fitting of parts to make sure everything's fitting and interacting well. If you don't have that luxury, you have to do an awful lot of really careful measurement to make sure that before we send the design to those steel tools that it works right the first time, because there's no adjustments.
Like for instance, when you design a figure, you don't just, design the outside. You have to design, how will this lay mold? It's a two-part mold. Then you have to design, okay, how are these pieces going to connect? You know, because it's like, inside all of these pieces, there's little pegs and things that slide together with screw holes fit. So you have to design this whole intricate system. That's what makes Transformers so amazing is the fact that the engineering that goes into each and every one. I mean, anybody get that little New Legend Starscream or Megatron? It's just, I mean, when you look at that, you're like, wow, to really think what goes into that is, oh, this is garbage. You know, there was a lot of time. I mean, between research and development, it can be 2 or 3 years for a figure to get finalized.
Yeah, it's you get a designer, when you start with concept art, right? So somebody's drawing. Then you get some designers and they're modeling. Then you use 3D printing now, which is awesome. It's a rapid prototype, but then you got to go back and revise a prototype because you can do things with 3D printer you can't replicate with molds, right? Because like if you have an undercut, it's called an undercut, where a lot of pieces you can't just put in the mold because the way it's designed, it won't be able to come back out because it'll have parts of the steel mold over it, so you'll never get it out. So then you got to go back and refine it. And steel molds cost a lot. And production numbers have a minimum. You're not going to get a factory in China to make 20. You know, they got like 2,000 minimum. Then you got to pay a graphic designer to design packaging. You got to pay a different factory to make that, a different print company. You got to pay somebody to put it together. You got to pay somebody to fly it to your online retailer. They got to make some money because although they love you guys, that's what they do for a living. And then you got to pay the USPS to ship it to your house. So from concept to on your shelf, there may be 13 companies, 14, 15 companies getting paid off of that. And when you're trying to make an add-on kit, like I don't know what you guys, my first third-party piece was City Commander. It was awesome. Like after City Commander, I was like, I have to have all this stuff all the time. I have to have everything.
And you're still here, so you can talk about it.
All right, sure.
That stuff is so incredible. You got so many talented designers, and then there is that whole not legal thing, that whole shadowy issue of when's the hammer going to fall from the legal team. So then you've got people that are wary about coming forward and talking about their product, or giving you their home address, or living in the country. Like these are real concerns for these people because it's become their livelihood. So when people complain about the cost of third-party stuff, these guys are not living on an island, right? Because you bought Hercules. Like, a lot of people made a little bit of money off of something that big, and in a sense, like if you want to be like a hardcore Transformer collector, you're probably not going to be satisfied with what Hasbro has to do. Now Hasbro's done some awesome stuff. Don't get me wrong. That Soundwave and Springer lately, come on, that was awesome. So I mean, they still try, but they've got a whole different agenda. They've got to make a whole line of figures cost the same in production.
Plus, there's a lot of legal issues as far as kid safety, and the government has so much control over like toys getting produced,
And Dr. Wu, you could kill your neighbor with some of that stuff.
Well, and not only that, a lot of things Hasbro does isn't necessarily from an outside legal entity. Hasbro does a really good job of trying to be proactive. Let's make sure this doesn't hurt a kid.
Right.
It's not something from the outside. They're doing all this stuff in-house.
Yeah, because they don't really hurt a kid or pay out a lawsuit. It's expensive. And then your cost of your toys go up. But that's why third-party costs so much, because there are literally like hundreds of people by the time it's done that have worked on it. These people are like putting in long hours and have an education base and a skill set, except for maybe the people putting them together. Oh, come on. I'm the only one that thinks that.
Yes.
They all say made in China. There's no college graduate for this thing.
This might be an ignorant question, but is there a reason a 3D printer couldn't create, instead of a mold, kind of a production of figures for you?
Yes. You got it?
Take that? Sure.
Go for it.
So, basically, the universe is unfair. There's no magic bullet, and math is math. And so at the 3D printing level, I can produce a number of figures that will probably meet my consumer demand, but it's gonna take many hours because it's a very slow
I
process.
see.
And also, because the market has gotten used to certain price points, you know, third party somewhere around $100 for a deluxe figure, Hasbro somewhere around $12 for a deluxe figure. You guys as consumers, and I don't blame you, want any product you buy to fall somewhere in that range.
Yeah,
And because of that limitation, in order to produce my materials at the time it takes, I have to charge a higher price. And now I'm being perceived as charging a really premium price for a premium figure, and depending on how it's perceived, the market isn't as large, I can sell fewer units, and it's a scale issue. Now Hasbro can sell 4 bazillion bumblebees, and so even though their steel modes cost the same amount as the third party guys, because they can make 2 pennies on every 6 bazillion bumblebees, they are still making a few bazillion dollars. Third party, we're gonna sell a few thousand if we're lucky.
Usually production runs anywhere between 1,000 and 5,000.
Yeah, and so when you're only making $1 on a figure at each level of that chain, we gotta charge a lot more to get those dollars in the pockets of people that need them. So, no matter what way you go, there's gonna be a cost and expense ratio that makes it hard to meet the price points you guys are looking for. That's really kind of what the hard stuff is.
And the plastic for 3D printers is just not up to par with action figures.
I was gonna comment on that. When you make a steel mold, you're actually pouring plastic dye and liquid plastic into a mold versus a 3D printer where the production's totally different. So if you make a steel mold, you can continually reproduce that literally until a mold crumbles. So just the types of production is different.
Yeah, there's a lot of material strength concerns with 3D printing that you don't have to worry about in steel molds, but the flip side is there's also things like undercuts that you don't have to worry about as much. So there's benefits and drawbacks to both methods. 3D printing, the material strength has gotten better, but still, and if you come up and look at one of some of the products later, there's a lot of design considerations I have to take into account that Hasbro or third party doesn't. I have to have flat surfaces because gravity matters to me in a way that it doesn't matter for the guys with steel mold. So it's a balancing act depending on the direction.
All right.
Okay, you got a question?
We all know how Hasbro deals with knockoffs. How do you guys deal with knockoffs of your products?
I don't make any products. I know nothing.